Well, I think we will begin. We're 2 minutes after the hour. So, hi everyone. Thanks for joining today. As you all know, this webinar is hosted by IQmetrics. We are excited to have an IQmetrics strategic partner, Statflo, and a mutual customer, Team Wireless, a Verizon agent presenting on how Team Wireless was able to optimize their customer outreach and build stronger one-to-one relationships with their customer base using Statflo, that IQmetrics strategic partner. Team Wireless has partnered with Statflo in May 2018 to optimize their current outreach process. Over the past 10 months, they have achieved a tremendous return on investment. In this webinar, we're going to look at exactly how they did that. And throughout the webinar, if you have questions, please feel free to pose them in the chat. So I'm Brett with IQmetrics, and I am a client manager for the Verizon Circle, ensuring all of those clients have exactly what they need. I've been with IQmetrics now for about 4 years, and yeah, I help with RQ. I go to all of our events, which is so exciting, so I might know some of you. And along with myself, our hosts include Sam Wager from Statflo and Dan Fee, the COO of Team Wireless. So Sam is a customer success manager at Statflo. She works closely with dealers and their leadership teams to coach them and ensure they see the true value of Statflo. Sam prides herself in retaining as much information about her clients and their business as possible to make sure they have the best experience with Statflo. Dan Fee is the COO of Team Wireless, working with the leadership team in sales, marketing, and operations. Team Wireless has 52 Verizon stores in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Illinois. Dan has 29 years of experience in the wireless industry in sales and in finance, between working with Team Wireless and directly for the carriers Verizon and Alltel. So here's our agenda for today. We will start with a brief introduction on Statflo and what they do by Sam, followed by an overview of Team Wireless's customer outreach evolution by Dan. Sam will then discuss the Statflo program and how they approach outreach. Finally, we will then go over the results Team Wireless has seen over the last 9 months as they've been using Statflo. For those of you that don't already know, Statflo has been a strategic IQmetrics partner for the past 3 years, and I'm going to hand it now over to Sam to talk all about Statflo in more detail.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brett. And hello to everyone. Thank you guys for joining this afternoon. What we're going to get into now is what Statflo does, for those of you who don't know. We're all about creating warm relationships. We leverage downtime within the store to allow associates to have one-on-one conversations with their existing customer base through text and phone call. Statflo is compliant, which means we take care of customer data, ensure our customers are following all local regulations, and create an audit trail of all customer activity. As a result, our local one-to-one approach drives much stronger conversion rates than mass marketing and traditional CRMs. This translates into more boxes per store for all of our customers. Statflo pulls your transaction data directly from your POS system. We transform it to take care of all data input errors and unique setups. We then create customer profiles with a 360 view of all transactions and customer outreach activity done by your reps. Statflo has a data analysis engine that allows you to target specific customers at specific times for specific reasons, and we call these smart lists or campaigns. We then arm your reps with the ability to call, text, book appointments, and engage with customers directly in our application. Because of this and our seamless connection to RQ, we are able to not only be sure that the rep activity took place, but also analyze the resulting transactions and show reps that their work had value. This translates into happy and empowered team members. Team Wireless has been an extremely engaged customer, and Dan has championed the system from day one. He was and continues to be an important contributor to the overall success at Statflo. Dan is what we call a Statflo champion. His leadership group analyzes results, encourages the team, and identifies coaching opportunities that lead to a greater return for team. We joined Team Wireless originally at their leadership conference in July of 2018 and introduced Statflo to their entire leadership group, executive, regional, and district managers, as well as all 51 store managers. At the start of August 2018, all stores began using Statflo, and we have not looked back since. Dan has some great insights into how Statflo has changed the way Team Wireless builds relationships with their customers. We built a great relationship along the way, and we are able to bounce ideas off each other and have constructive business conversations to understand how to better utilize all functionalities that Statflo has to offer. I'm excited to introduce Dan to speak about Team Wireless's outreach evolution and how they've embraced Statflo as a core part of that. So Dan, over to you.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Hey, this afternoon, I want to accomplish a couple things. Number one, give some insight on what we were thinking as a leadership team to make the investment in the Statflo and what some of our objectives were going into it. And now that we've launched since July of last year, give some insight into some of the key challenges you see on the slide right now and how Statflo absolutely has been able to overcome those challenges and obstacles and help us with a return on investment. So give some insight. Team Wireless has 52 Verizon stores in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Our stores are in rural America. So, one key benefit of having stores in rural America is the relationships we have with the guests that come into our stores. They know us, they know our team employees, they trust us. If we don't do something right, it has a big impact on our future performance, because as they go out and tell their friends and family, that impact is significant for us. So a couple key objectives we had getting into our relationship with Statflo was we wanted an outreach program that improved what we had, but we needed it to be guest receptive. We needed it to be in a manner where the guest would strengthen the relationship they had with us and not drive them further away. Second objective is, it's always challenging, right, for an outreach program to get your team on board. Making outbound calls is not the most exciting and favorite thing for our employees to do. So prior to launching it, we really did work with Statflo on what's the plan to get our team engaged and reinforce that message that this is a tool to help us strengthen the relationship with our guests and not drive them away. And the third objective, that relates directly to return on investment is, as you all know, the cycle for our guests to upgrade their phones has been growing longer and longer, which has a significant impact on our profitability. So that was a very key objective for us in our relationship with Statflo, is how can we use this outreach program to strengthen the relationship with a guest, but use the current promotions, trades, things of that nature to try and speed up that upgrade cycle to make us more profitable. So before Statflo, here's some of the challenges we had, right? So number one, just creating a list. The time and resources that it took to create a list, it was always someone's secondary job to create a list. And quite honestly, we went a couple different routes on this. At some point, we had our marketing team create the list in our queue because they were familiar with what the promos were, when they ended, to try and control that list. We also opened it up in our queue where store managers, district managers could create their own list. Their incentive to get paid, to get commissions, to hit targets. So they absolutely used our queue to create lists for their own store, for their own district, to try and drive some of those results. A concern there for us as a company was really didn't have a lot of control over what those lists were, how they were pulling that data, what they were hoping to achieve, and what they were coaching their team to do with that list. So, the second challenge before Statflo was just what data did we actually have, right? So you really didn't have data that would help us effectively coach to behaviors. You couldn't celebrate successes. You couldn't coach to people that were just gaming the system to get off the naughty list because they had some records in their marketing campaign that they didn't use to reach out to a guest. And even if they were effectively used in that marketing campaign, we didn't have data to show us how effective that was. Were the guests actually coming into the store? If they were coming into the store, were they actually buying something? And even if they were coming in the store, were they actually working with the person that reached out to them through the marketing campaign? So what I can tell you, all of those objectives have been solved with Statflo. So I wanted to go into a little more detail on how that is working right now. So challenge number one was the list creation. So I touched on the challenge it was just from a resource perspective and a consistency perspective. So how Statflo solved our challenge of creating a list is, number one, it really focused me and our leadership team on being engaged and involved in the process of creating the list. So the great thing about Statflo is once we give them our expectations, set the parameters on how to pull the data, the list is there. The list is there for our employees and for our stores to use, but it really did force us as a leadership team to spend more time on what should this list look like, what is the consistent list we want our team to be focused on, and what results are we going after. Once that decision is made, it's really simple. We talk to Sam, she does some magic, and then the list is out there for our sales employees and our stores to use the list. One great thing about that list is, as probably similar to everyone on this call, there's turnover that happens in our store. So there is a very valuable tool within the list where store managers, district managers, or above can reassign the records as it's pulled from our queue if that employee is no longer with us to somebody else that is in that store. So the second challenge is, how do you get your sales team engaged in making outbound calls? So I'm guessing Team Wireless is not the only company that has a hard time getting people excited and motivated to make outbound calls as a frontline sales person. Even our onboarding process is so detailed, right? When you think of all the products that Verizon has, all of the rate plan details, in a 1 week period of time through our onboarding. We do have onboarding after that first week, but the first week is in store, just getting them to learn our queue, getting them to learn Omni. It's really when they get back into the store, working with the store manager, that it's okay for you to be successful, for you to make commissions, for you to drive the results. Here's a very valuable tool in Statflo to be able to use. But how do you get them engaged? So I could tell you without a shadow of a doubt, if I walked into a store and asked our employees what they like most about Statflo, it is absolutely the ability to send a warm chat starter text messaging before they actually make that phone call. And so some details on chat starter. It is not a sales pitch. It is not sales motivated in any way, shape, or form. So that chat starter really is back to how we sold it to our team. How do we build the relationship with the guests that are coming into our store? How can we have an outreach program where we reach out to them that they feel the message is, okay, that's my local store just checking up on me and trying to take care of me. And that's exactly what this chat starter does. So, as we've moved along, we've got better at that. For each list that we have, there's a collaborative effort with Sam and with our district managers, our VP sales, is we want very specific chat starters in each campaign that is specific to that campaign. So when the guest receives that text message, it really is a warm message coming from a perspective of, I'm your local person trying to help you. The other coaching opportunity, and we have details that you can view this inside the platform, is you want that text message to be descriptive and personal. So for example, this is Dan from Team Wireless Verizon on Lincoln Highway, next to Starbucks. I'm just checking in to see how your iPhone 7 is working out for you. And we know the guest has an iPhone 7 because our queue is pulling that data for us. So, the key is, the point I'm talking here about is how do we get our people engaged? When they're able to send that message ahead of time and then they make the phone call, the guest already has received that text message. They know it came from somebody local. They know it's not a spam message. They're a lot more willing to work with us. It makes our employees a lot more comfortable. And we're actually seeing that the guests are responding to those messages, which makes the follow-up phone call just so much easier. So this slide, you can actually see our team is responding to any reply we get from a guest within 2 hours, about 66% of the time. About 80% of the time, we're responding to a guest in that first 24 hours. And then we're speaking to our guests that are in all of our lists each month. About 37 to 40% of the time, we're actually able to speak to those guests. And one thing I'd like to point out, this slide you're looking at right now really hits on one of those challenges I talked about earlier, that just having this data makes us better, that we can do something with this, we can coach to it, and then we can move forward and try and improve on it. So the third challenge is, once you got the employees engaged, is what tools are available for the managers to effectively coach. And Statflo has really solved that problem by giving us the data and the tools to be able to see how effective and how often our frontline is actually reaching out to the guest. You know, as I mentioned before Statflo, all we really had was completion rates. So what our team, what our sales leaders were just coaching to is, did you complete the list? There was no insight to how effective that was. There was no insight to, did the guest actually respond or come into the store? So so now we can actually see if it was completed, and we can see how often our frontline is reaching out. We can see if it is a phone call. We can see how long the phone call took, and we could see what is the time interval between calls. So, people are hitting KPIs, and when you dig into the details that Statflo provides, you can see if they're doing it the right way. You can also see if they're doing it the wrong way. And now our sales leadership has the tools that they need to be able to hold them accountable and coach to the right behaviors. So this slide, as you can see, our expectations when we roll out Statflo is we want to attempt to hit 100% of every guest that's in our list. So through the text and through the phone call, we need that to try and be 100%. And then, as you can see, our top stores, we're getting 40% of the time, we're getting in contact with that guest on a campaign that was specifically designed to try and help us drive additional productivity. So, from that perspective, Statflo really has figured out our cues. All levels of our leadership team has insight into this reporting where we can view and inspect the results. And our stores and our employees can easily be ranked, so we can see who's doing a good job, to pat them on the back, and who needs some additional help. With that said, Sam is got the opportunity right now to give you a demo of some of the things I'm talking about. I hope I was able to give you insight on why we wanted to do it, how it solves some of our problems. But before Sam gives the demo, I need to give her some praise. I could not be happier to have Sam as our customer manager and our client manager. When I think of the key words about Sam, she is always available, and I mean always available. So I'm sorry about that, Sam. We use her a lot. She is completely engaged, and she is a true partner in our success, and we feel that all the time. From day one, the way we did this is we have a summer leadership conference, and we introduced Statflo to all of our store managers at the summer leadership conference. It was our chance as an executive team to talk about why we're making this investment and what we expected from our team once we gave them these tools. And then Sam was there with several other support people from Statflo, being able to demonstrate the tools that she's about to demonstrate right now, and more importantly, really effectively coach our team based on other clients' experiences, what they were doing right to get results, what they did wrong, so we don't repeat those results, And ever since then, Sam's been in our corner. We have calls every month with our district managers. We go through these same tools that you're about to see right now. We give praise to the people who are doing well. We find out why people are struggling. But again, what we didn't have before as a company is the tools to be able to hold people accountable and review those results. And Sam has definitely been engaged in helping us do that. So once again, Sam, thank you for all your support.
Thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate it. Happy to work with you guys, honestly. What we're going to get into now, as you can see on your screen, is Statflo. So taking all of what Dan told you and kind of showing you how the magic happens. Just a brief demo right now, high-level view of kind of how the system works. We are looking at a demo account, just so you know, so keep that in mind. But what you have here in front of you is the welcome page. So this is really a summary of everything that's happened so far in the month. Statflo works on a monthly basis. So this is just an idea of how people are trending for this given month. Lets you know how your campaigns are doing and really all other aspects, what appointments have been booked, what kind of activity is happening. Just a quick snapshot. So what we're going to get into here is the CRM, which is really where reps will spend the majority of their time in the system. You can see we have a smart lists tab. So this is the campaigns. This is what they will be working on. There's a lot of different ways to filter through these accounts, but really the goal is that they set themselves up with an effective workflow and they follow that consistently throughout the month. So they're going to want to target specific accounts that they'll reach out to. I have a test account here to show you guys at the moment. And once we get into the customer profile, as was mentioned earlier, Statflo partners very closely with IQ Metrics. So what we have here is typically, when it's not a demo account, you'll be able to see all of the RQ transactions within the profile, which really gives the rep that additional amount of context when they're going to reach out to a customer. Any other outreach efforts that have been done will show here on this page as well. And it really just lets you know what's happened in the past with this account so you can be all that much more knowledgeable when talking to the customer. So in terms of how to actually reach out, there's this big start a conversation button on the top right-hand side of the screen. When I click on that, if I can click, there we go. It lets me choose from a couple of different contacts, whoever's listed on the account. So I want to pick the one that I'm wanting to reach out to. So if I click on the little text icon here, it's going to bring me over to the Statflo Messenger. And from here, what you can see is we have some choices of chat starters to choose from. So as Dan mentioned, they've kind of catered exactly which conversation starters they'd like to use to specific campaigns. And that really is a way of minimizing any user error and just making sure that the conversation is super focused on the point at hand. So there would likely not be this many options for them. But what I would do here is choose one of the starters and just fill in any of the blanks. So we're on my account. So, hey, hey, Sam, this is Samantha. I'm just going to have a conversation with myself here. But typically it would just be the rep's name and the customer's name. And then the location, which is super important. This is where we get as local as possible. So we would say from Team Wireless, the Verizon store, like Dan mentioned, on Lincoln Avenue near the Starbucks or whatever the specific location is, but just something that's familiar with your customers so that they know exactly who's reaching out and why they're reaching out. There's no chance they don't think it's them. That's really the goal here. Once we've filled in all of these blanks, we would click send, and that would go out to the customer. One cool thing here is if I hover along the bottom, you'll notice that I'm not actually able to send another message. We actually block reps from sending a follow-up or an additional message for 5 days just to make sure that the customer has had a chance to digest that information, chosen whether they're ready to respond back or not, and then reps can follow up later on in the month or in the week. So that's really high level how the texting area works within Statflo. From here, reps can log an activity based on what the outcome of those messages are. So they can book a meeting, pick their date and time, add notes, and then save it. And then we have the option here to go back to the account. Once we get back over to this account, you'll notice now that right away it will reflect the text message that I just sent. Once it loads to the customer or to myself, So really any activity that's happening within that customer profile will live update here on the timeline. The other option here from start a conversation is also to make a phone call, which will open up a separate page. There we go. So what happens here is the system will call out to my number, which I have saved on my profile. And from there, it will call out to the customer. Now, one thing that you should keep in mind is that it actually never reaches, the customer will never see a rep's personal cell phone number. They'll see the number set up by Statflo. And that way, if they miss the call and they call that number back, it will redirect to all of your stores. So a question that we often get is, where does this number come from? What is the number? So we've set up a local number to each of your locations. It's not necessarily your store number, but it is a local area code. So no one thinks that it's spam or anything like that. It's local, and they really do have the inkling that it is the store reaching out. Same number comes from texting and calling, so it's consistent. How do I get back out of here? So that opens up a separate page here, as you can see. But if I get back into the system for a second. Oh, we've got a question, actually. This is a good time to answer it, from Andrew. What is the address the customer is seeing from the text? So the address is, it's not an address, actually. It's a phone number, as I mentioned. So we would have a local phone number. The actual locator itself is whatever you guys have set up. So Team Wireless would have instructed their team to put a specific locator to, again, sound consistent and sound local. And that's what the customer would see in the text area. Now I think we're just getting the system back open here. There we go. Cool. So thank you. So that is the CRM area. That's within SmartList, the different ability to reach out to the customer within your campaigns, but you can also add leads into the system. And this is a really cool thing for newer stores. Something that Dan could attest to as well is they had some newer stores joining Statflo who may not necessarily have so much of a SmartList or large campaigns to begin, but they certainly have the ability to add leads. So if there are new customers walking in or calling the store, reps can add them in, follow up with them as soon as they make transactions in our queue. They will then have an account profile that will eventually be in a SmartList and can be reached out to. So kind of does full circle with that, and just gives reps an additional functionality if they don't have campaigns to work on at the start. Otherwise, I think, for a high level view, that's really what Statflo does. That's kind of a day in the life of reps. At the end, we'll allow you guys to ask any additional questions that you might have. But for now, I think we'll get back to the presentation area. Please and thank you. Cool. So what we're going to get into now is a couple snapshots here, I guess, of the management side of things. So what managers see, what's really the benefit for them in terms of using the system and viewing what their reps are doing. So first thing is, they really have a 360 view of what's happening in the system. It allows for full visibility into the full text conversation, any phone calls that are made, as Dan mentioned earlier. How long was that call? Can we coach towards maybe tightening up the calls or maybe asking additional questions to make things longer? So there's a lot of information that can be seen really just in the customer profile that can help enhance performance within each location. One of the main reports that we use is called How Close Am I to Completing My Smart List? So those dials that you saw on the welcome page are a high level indication of how the smart lists are going, but there is a report that allows you to really dive into that activity. So you can see how many accounts are in the list to start for the whole month, how many have been attempted so far. So going back to Dan's point, they have sort of set an expectation that 100% is attempted by a certain date within a month, which I see a lot of our clients doing. But this gives you an indication of whether that's been hit, how close are they to doing that, and then how many people have been reached. So the initial reached amount is not always as high as you would like to see, but that's why we do follow up throughout the month, because we're working on getting that reach rate up as we continue to send messages or make phone calls to customers. This may seem like a very simple report, and honestly it is, but I find it to be really useful in terms of, you can dive into at the district level, you can look at store level, even down to the rep, just to see who's being effective and where there can be a little more coaching, and just who needs help, who is struggling, maybe, as a good word that Dan chose earlier. Next, we have the other main report that people are using, which is the activity report. So the last report is just a high-level overview of how close are we, how are we trending for this month. This report really dives into that activity, so we can see, of those attempts, how many texts have been sent, how many of them are calls, what's the conversion rate in terms of how many phone calls have been made versus how many were answered, and same thing goes for texts, how many were sent as well, as opposed to how many have been received. So it gives a little more insight. You're able to click on any rep's name in this report and get a screenshot or a snapshot of all of their activity in terms of the actual messages they're sending. And I find that managers have really started to utilize this report to its fullest, especially at Team Wireless, which is awesome. Now we're going to get into a bit here of what was the process. How did we onboard Team Wireless last year? So it all started with a welcome call after we got everything sorted out. We hosted a welcome call with the leadership team at Team to establish, what are our timelines? What's the goal? My goal is, what do you want to see to make yourselves think that you've been successful? So that's really what we've established right from the start. We then move into a data mapping call, which is just to make sure that the way that you have RQ set up is what we think we see, just ensuring we're aligned. Everything is categorized as it should be, so that it all looks as it should in Statflo. Then we work on a few weeks of just setting up the account, getting all of your users and stores set up, and doing QA throughout. And then that's where Dan mentioned when we came to do the leadership summit with Team and did a kickoff and in-person training, which was awesome. Getting to meet everyone right from the start was such a benefit to start building those relationships. We did a bit of managed services at the end of July, which was awesome because, we really got that momentum moving with Team Wireless and started to do some outreach on their behalf to then move into a full launch August 1st. We did a few days of webinar trainings for the team, and then we started management calls to coach them onto the right activity within a couple of weeks. So we were hosting leadership and management calls on a weekly basis for a couple of months, just to make sure everyone understood what they were looking for and really what they were looking at, for that matter. Which was great. We really got momentum by doing those calls. And by October, we were doing our first review of how everything had gone. And then just recently in February, we were able to join Team Wireless at another leadership conference that they had. Another great time to be face-to-face with all of these end users of Statflo to get their feedback, see what they were liking, see how I can help to make their experience better. So that's kind of been the life of Statflo and Team Wireless for the last 6 or 8 months. It's been wonderful so far. That being said, I want to kind of dive in here to Team Wireless's results and what we've seen. One thing to take note of, I think a lot of people are like, oh, right, results. We're going to see dollar values now. This is great. I want to see what they're earning. But there's so much more to it in terms of this system because of the importance of getting your teams engaged. And, when you see field engagement, the results are just going to come through it. So the first thing I want to show here is the engagement in terms of how much has been attempted, how many people have been reached, what are we leaving behind in terms of not attempting. And so what you can see here on the page is a graph kind of reflecting that. For the most part, especially in the last few months, Team has been awesome at getting usually at least 90% of their accounts attempted. They are on it right from the beginning of the month. Usually by the 10th, they've got the majority of their list dealt with so that they can start following up. And that really is where the results come from, getting a solid workflow, setting those expectations so that the field has no question as to what they need to be doing. They really know it. They live and breathe it. And, Dan and I were talking earlier today. We did see a bit of a dip at the start of this year. in terms of engagement, and we've kind of revamped a bit more coaching to get people back on board to make sure that they're aligned and they understand what's expected of them. So that is what this graph represents. The next one is the actual ROI results from team, and I'm going to pass it over to Dan to speak to this a little more.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sam. So when I look at this, a couple things that come to my mind is, so number one, and first thing comes to mind is we are getting the return that we wanted to get from Statflo. But I also look at this and say, because we have this data and we're still only a few months in and learning from it, I know that we can get better. So that's probably the most exciting part about looking at this. When I see some of the ups and downs, so this is showing our gross profit return on the investment that we're making into Statflo, specifically from guests that are in a list within the first 30 days. So, again, data's powerful, right? So when I look at this, a couple things come to mind is the strength of the list, right? Some lists are better than others in terms of generating gross profit. So again, back to the engagement at my level and the leadership level is really being engaged at creating the right list. Certainly there's some seasonality built into this. The Verizon promos will drive some of that success on what that return looks like. And then more importantly is the tools that I mentioned earlier. A lot of this success comes directly from our execution, and in some cases our poor execution. So that's why we're having the monthly calls with the district managers when we start seeing some of those trends, to one, make sure that we got the right list, they understand why we're doing it, talk about some of the positioning statements when we do get in contact with the guest, and just make sure that they're managing the right behaviors from the front line. So, I think it's like everything in our business. If you're using the tools that you have, and now we actually have the tools, which is a cover at the beginning we really didn't have before. If you're making quality calls and text, if the managers are empowered with the data to be able to pat someone on the back or start coaching them when the behaviors are getting bad, then these results will follow. So I truly believe we have the data we need to keep being successful, and that's why I'm a really happy customer of Statflo.
And I think you really hit on a good point there, Dan, that it is crucially important to be praising your employees. And I think you guys at Team do a wonderful job at doing that. When they've done great, you let them know, and they're well aware of when they need improvement because you're open with feedback, whether it is positive or constructive. But yeah, thank you for speaking to those results a bit. And thank you so much for joining this webinar today. But what we're going to move into now is a Q&A period. So if anyone has any questions, now would be a great time to put them in the chat. I think for now, I will just kick it off with a question while we see if anything else has popped up. But Dan, one thing I've heard other people ask, and I'm curious myself, is how has Statflo helped for you guys to hit the KPIs that Verizon sets for you?
Yeah, I think I mentioned in the beginning what our key objectives were. And, the number one priority we really wanted to get out of the outreach program was trying to speed up that upgrade cycle. So customers are holding on to that phone a lot longer than they have in the past. That has a direct impact when you look at how many upgrades we do as a company to try and incent a guest to be able to come in and speed that process up. So when we see Verizon promotions, when there's good trade value promotions, we're able to work with Sam to create a list. And like I said, it's also customer centric. The way we're reaching out to the guest ties directly into our rural footprint, where our employees feel like it's easier than just making a cold call. And our engagement as a leadership team is creating that list where we think it's going to bring the most guests in. So. Yeah,
absolutely. That makes sense. Have any questions come in, guys, or should I continue? All right. Well, don't worry. I've got a list here. I know one thing that you guys did that was a bit different than other people was just a full rollout right from the start. And were there any concerns with doing that? Why did you choose to go that way? Just a bit of detail on that.
Yeah, I think for us, and this is probably just our personal approach, is we didn't just jump into Statflo. There were several conversations before we jumped in and say, okay, this is an investment that we want to make. But once we got past that, once we knew that this was going to give us a return, it's like, why wouldn't you do it across the entire company? I think there were more challenges of not doing it across the company when you have performance targets and commission at stake, and you're giving tools to some people and not to others. We just needed to be sure that we were going to get a return. And once we were sure, the leadership conference was the right time for us as executives to talk about why we're doing it and what our expectations was. And it was great to have Statflo there to say, this is how you do it.
Yeah, I mean, with you guys, I thought it went wonderfully. And something you and I had spoken about before was maybe one store would be talking about how awesome it was and how well they'd been doing, and other store would be like, well, why don't I have that tool? So I can understand what you mean in terms of getting everyone on board at the same time. That was
For sure.
That was a good call, I'd say. Generally, with the onboarding process, what did you guys think? Did you feel that it went at a good pace? What were your thoughts generally?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, nobody likes to do it. I don't think, especially when you get to the frontline associate, the real good ones that are making a lot of money know why it's important and see the value into it. And they're not the ones that need the coaching. But I don't know if that's the lion's share of our frontline employees. So, I think the onboarding piece, like I mentioned before, if I walked into any store and said, what's your favorite thing about Statflo? It's being able to send that chat starter message first, because it's really a softer message to the guest. It gets them engaged. We start seeing replies right away before they make that phone call. So from an onboarding perspective, just getting that message out there and how important it is that chat starter is detailed, right? And you showed it on your screen. Is my name on there? Do I have a very good description of where their store is located? So the guest receiving that message knows, hey, this is my local Verizon person that I know. So why not reply?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I cannot reiterate that enough when I do host a training. If you just put, hey, this is Sam from the store up the street, no one is ever going to answer. So crucially important there. Last one that I have is, how has your field leadership in terms of district or regional managers responded to coaching and just generally implementing this, pushing it to their teams? What has been their process for that?
Yeah, I said it wasn't a challenge, right? It's before you couldn't hold them accountable because you didn't have the data to do it, right? So now it's like, here's the new process. It's important for us to be profitable going forward. We need to do this, but it was something that was added on, right? Not that we didn't have marketing campaigns before, but I couldn't look at someone and say, all I saw was a call completion rate. Like, okay, all your people are reaching out. I didn't have the ROI to measure. I couldn't look at the detail to say, okay, this person is just checking the boxes saying they made these phone calls. So it put more on their plate. So you had to get over that hurdle, but now they see the value in it, right? I mean, it's harder and harder to hit an upgrade target and to grow our business year over year without this being a tool. So once they understand that, and now they have the tools to coach to it.
Right. And you mentioned an interesting point saying, people were showing completion before, and what were you going to do? Call them out and say, but did you really do that? Yeah. That might not be the best impression. So it is an interesting approach now. I think we have one other question that's come in. Could we go over how the lists are created again? Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I could take that one. Dan, or really any customer, will typically let me know what they would like to see in terms of a campaign. So if they want to see anyone who purchased a phone between 19 and 20 months ago, I will go to our data team and let them know. And what they'll do is pull transactions through our queue that happened between 19 and 20 months ago. If they've purchased something since then, they will be scrubbed off of the list. If they are DNC, they will be scrubbed off the list. Really, anyone that is within that time frame but shouldn't be reached out to or isn't actually eligible will be removed. And once we've come up with that final list, it will get loaded into Statflo, typically at the beginning of the month. As we mentioned, the system kind of works on a monthly basis, and then it's free for the reps to reach out. Hopefully that answers your question. Do we have any other questions that have come in? No? All right, well, I think we are good to move on to the final slide here. And then Mary Beth is going to be taking this one.
thank you guys. Thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you to all of our hosts. We really appreciate you guys joining us for the webinar. We did also want to make sure that you guys check out the Acumetrics meetup event. We want to invite you all to join us in Denver, Colorado, September 3rd through the 5th. If you have any questions around this, we can definitely get you guys set up. But we would like to see everyone there. And thank you guys again for joining us. With some great content and a great webinar. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary Beth. And I just want to thank Brett again so much for hosting and kicking things off at the beginning. That was wonderful. We appreciate your help on that. And Dan, as always, thanks for being such a great partner, and a pleasure to work with you and the team. Have been nothing but a blast.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks everyone for joining.